here with Taryn. Welcome, Taryn. It's so nice to see you again. We had a bit of audio problems last time, so we're Zooming today, which I'm so grateful for. And we're talking about a subject I'm very passionate about the pain and about the numbness, about the changes in postpartum sex that we often don't talk about. And I think it's so helpful to have you as an expert to give us insight on this topic. And for those who don't know you, which I can't imagine, what is it that you do exactly?
Thank you. You're so beautiful. I'm Taryn, and I am a women's pelvic floor physiotherapist. I really was in focus on postpartum women, and the more I open my work, I'm working with more and more women across their entire lifespan. And I've really discovered for myself a more expansive way of working with women in terms of pelvic floor physiotherapy, not just from a physical body perspective, but a more integrated perspective where it's about the mind, the body, the soul, the energetic body, the emotional body. And that has been really the difference in how I approach my work when I see now the whole woman rather than just a physical body. So that's been the biggest learning for myself in how I work with women and how I work with women in particular in this space of pelvic health.
That's beautiful. And I think if you're not following Taryn yet, you should, because this whole connection you make between the emotional, the spiritual, and how it manifests physically is something you don't see often enough. And it's so important because it makes you feel heard and understood to know that there is no difference between what you're experiencing emotionally and physically. They're so intimately connected. And um, how do you see this translating into this topic that we're talking about today?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And coming from a very clinical, evidence based medicine model that we're taught in physiotherapy, I was having that approach with women and working on the physical body level. And when I started to work within my own body, this is really how I started to explore this interconnectedness of this work was through my own personal experience and from a really embodied perspective. And so when I was trying to heal my own pelvic pain after the birth of my second child, I had a very physical approach. And whilst it helped somewhat, there was still so many missing pieces of the puzzle. And so until I addressed more emotionally and energetically and spiritually this healing pathway, then I felt that disconnect from my body, and it I felt disembodied and really disappointed in my body, and it wasn't progressing in the way that I was wanting to. And it wasn't until I met myself where I was at and really embraced this as an experience to grow, not just physically and my physical connection with my body, but the emotional and energetic connection. Did I see any difference, any real big differences in how I felt in my body? And that has been my experience with other women, that they have tried a very physical approach with perhaps a physical therapist or a physiotherapist, and tried very body, physical body approaches with some success, but limited success. And often when we're broaching the subject of sex and intimacy and postpartum sex, and really in all realms of pelvic health, in my experience, when we begin to have this more integrated approach, more pieces of the puzzle start to reveal themselves. And it's really a body-led way of nourishing and restoring and creating new connection with the body in such a way that the pathway towards healing is really held within the woman's body herself. And it's just being able to explore that pathway in a way that's non-linear and not just physical. And when that world opens up for women, I feel like it starts to make so much more sense. And the things that we have that sensation of there's more to this than what we're exploring here, or it still just doesn't feel right. Our common expressions of women. And when we start to take this more layered approach, that's when we start to reveal more, and she begins to feel like, oh, this is landing for me in my body. Like, this is really starting to make sense now. And it's not that it's more complex. It's actually quite simple often, but it's more that it's all the things that she intuitively understood or felt there was a feeling, but she perhaps couldn't put words to, start to come together.
Yeah, because rationally, often we want to do a certain thing or we know we should do it in a way. And it's often the unlearning of how to approach the problem rationally. Like, it should be physical because I feel pain. And then to unlearn that it can be emotional or it's just like a signal of trauma that you're experiencing pain. Is that the brokenness you talk about in your posts?
Yeah, and this is a really again a layeredness of too how women often feel broken in their bodies, and it's a common description that women use. Words like, uh, I feel broken in my body. I feel disconnected from my body. Often women will have a way of talking about their body and really literally push their arms across the center of their body and say, I feel like I've just been cut off from here down. So from navel down, it's like this part of me just doesn't exist. And so it's part of a common experience that women have, particularly after pregnancy, after birth, because we have such dramatic changes in a short period of time. And we're not really taught to embrace transition phases as human beings, but also particularly as women. And we are consistently taught that women's bodies are wrong in some way, broken in some way. And only just today, I was having this beautiful conversation with a group of women, and we were talking about the different phases and cycles that women move through: the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, and how each of these phases and transitions have actually been heavily medicalized in our Western world. And that medicalization, that taught uh, concept that these are medical conditions, or there's something wrong with your body that needs to be fixed. So it's really those two pieces, and that we don't often have created for us, and we don't experience safe and sacred spaces that are really just designed to help us move through these transition phases so that we can actually meet ourselves again as the woman we are in this new body, in this new phase of our life. And we really tend to feel like, okay, I used to feel like that, but now I feel like this, which is different. So it must be wrong. And it's not wrong, it's just very different. And so it's getting to reacquaint yourself with your body and getting to know your body again, understand your body's language, and not come from a place of what do I need to fix or change here to make it right, but a place of what is here for me to learn from, to experience, to express, to explore. And when we take that different lens, that new approach, that is the peace that we're often searching for. We're wanting to experience, women want to feel at peace in their body. They want to feel whole in their body. They want to feel strong, capable, resilient. And when we're approaching from the body is wrong, we must try and fix it standpoint, those feelings just remain elusive to us. But when we actually sit within ourselves and say, okay, I'm going to meet myself where I'm at, what is here for me, that's a completely different relationship that you're nurturing then. And you then have that sense of peace, that sense of wholeness, because it actually already exists within us, but it's that consistent wronging that makes us feel not whole, not at peace, not strong, not resilient.
And I think it's at the end of the day, it's acceptance, right? We don't learn that it's okay to accept. To accept where we're at is not an admittance of failure, or it's not admitting that we'll always be here and always experience pain, or it's always going to be like this. And I think that's such a key part, because acceptance is the path to healing. But when we don't get to accept because we think it's failure, or we think then we just admit that it won't get better, then we can't move forward. And I think it's such a key element, right? Exactly what you're saying, that when you accept and when you can say, okay, it's a fine, I'm here and it's not where I want to be, but it's okay, that then you can move forward, even in the intimacy, right? Even having intercourse and accepting that this is not how it's supposed to be or how I want it to be, but it's what it is. Is that
Mm-hmm.
as well?
I think you point out such a potent piece here. And what really lands for me when you say that is that acceptance doesn't mean I'm accepting that this is okay for me to feel like this forever, because that there's two very big differences between accepting this is normal, say for example pain with sex or a complete disinterest in sex, versus accepting, okay, this is where I'm at. This is not how I would like to feel during sex, but this is how I feel. So let's explore what is here around how I'm experiencing sex, rather than switching straight to, no, I don't want to feel like that, so I must change something. Or in acceptance, we feel like then, well, that's just how it's going to be. And that is not what we're talking about here when we're talking about accepting the phase and stage that you're in. It's about embracing from a perspective of, but let's be curious about that, and let's work with the body, the mind, the energy, and the partner to actually make this something to be different for me, without it having to rush, without it having to be different in a week, a month, or giving ourselves some sort of parameter or time frame or expectation around our experience.
Yeah, and also I really love what you say, because in the beginning you were talking about just feeling guilty about the pain and feeling guilty that you're here, and there comes with that such a disassociation of the body. Like, this is not my body. The only body I liked was the one pre-pregnancy or when I was 21 or whatnot age, and this is not it. And from there stems so much unsafety and dissatisfaction, frustration, and just the simple lack of joy of existing, right? Just being happy in your physical experience leaves your body when you can't accept that this is it. And
Just so,
yeah, no,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah. Because I wonder how it's such a negative feeling that we get bombarded with constantly, and social media doesn't help, TV doesn't help, none of this helps, right? Because you're constantly viewing others who are doing better, looking better, having a happy relationship after Valentine's Day, and it's in your face, right? This constant comparison as well, on top of the lack of acceptance. How do you get back to a place of just being and just accepting and just being able to enjoy your physicality again?
Mhm. So there's two things there for me, is that we often are in acceptance after we've moved through the phase and stage. Say if you said there, you know, my 21-year-old body, but in all reality, women are in acceptance often of the 21-year-old body when they're now in the 30-year-old body. But if they really examined how they felt when they were in that 21-year-old body, was actually quite the same as how she feels now. And so we're so practiced at not feeling good in our bodies for as a whole, as a start. And we don't practice as much because we don't have the tools necessarily to practice this, because we haven't been shown how, because women's bodies are seen as wrong and inconvenient and need to be fixed or changed in some way to be accepted, to be okay, to be good enough. And so it's really looking at, you know, all of the stories that exist within us, all of the mindsets that exist within us, but really then becoming a practice of sitting with the self and with the body and actually asking what feels more true for me. And that is a really beautiful practice when you simply, you know, close down the eyes, breathe into the body, start to feel how the body moves with the breath, and really get into that space of attunement with the body and asking the body, what is here for me? How do I feel? And lots of emotions will arise and lots of different sensations and feelings will come up. And not always will they be you know, you don't want to say that they're positive or negative, but sometimes it will be this sense of beautiful wholeness and that you never knew existed within you. It just, you just need to practice it. Or it could be a deep sadness is actually sitting here, but we didn't ever reveal that there was a deep sadness underneath the layers of everything, because we never sat with our body and ourselves long enough to actually experience that. And we as a society are really quite uncomfortable with feeling the spectrum of emotions, because we think in some way that we're not capable of doing that. Yet we are so capable of doing that. And it's often almost like I'm going to use a word parallel, but I don't know if that's quite the right word, but paralleled experience, in the sense that women often describe when we do a womb meditation, for example, coming into the pelvic bowl, into the pelvic floor, experiencing this space in their body, there is a sense of great joy, peace, wholeness that is innately there, often accompanied by a deep sadness. And that deep sadness might be from having a particular experience, or it is often from a sensation of, wow, I feel this wholeness within myself and I've never accepted myself as whole. And there's a grieving of all of those years that I've been in this body and I haven't experienced this. So they're often, you know, these two very different polar experiences, emotions, energies. But we are capable of sitting with them and what is shown to us and revealed to us, which is why integrated and an integrated approach towards pelvic health works so beautifully, is that there's so much here within women's bodies that we just haven't yet explored. And the way to explore it, the tools that we can use to explore it, are really simple, very available to all of us in this moment right now.
There are so many questions that are coming up for me after this. But I think the first is because you're saying about sitting with the experience. And often when we talk in the context of postpartum, there's birth trauma. Can you speak to that and how that has an influence on how we experience sex after delivery?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think a really important piece here is that when we view trauma, or when we contemplate trauma, when we contemplate our birth experience, is that we recognize that trauma can be more than just physical. So there is physical birth trauma in the sense that perhaps an unanticipated intervention needed to happen. Uh, It might be how you envisioned or imagined your birth to be is completely different. But there is also emotional and energetic trauma. So when a woman hasn't felt completely supported in her birth experience, whether that be because she wasn't well informed, because decisions were rushed or thrust upon her, she lacked choices and informed choice. It might be a simple comment from one nurse, for example, who, maybe in a different energy on a different day, you might have felt differently about that and could have, passed it off, could have been like, oh, that's her stuff, not mine. But it's all circumstantial, it's all experiential, and it can impact us and can have the impact of trauma on our bodies. And so, what I often see is one, a lack of recognition of our birth experience and birth trauma, because we often view trauma as very physical. Two, this sense of guilt of having experienced trauma because, well, I have a healthy baby and I'm still here and alive, and what am I complaining about? And then the lastly there is again, when we take a very physical approach to the physical body, we don't necessarily recognize, even though science does back up that it is environmental. Pain is environmental, it's emotional. It's not always a reflection of actually tissue trauma. It's a reflection of a remembered experience that our body has felt. And so we have these protective mechanisms, for example. And so when we move beyond birth and say, for example, talking about postpartum sex, when a woman experiences pain, what I often see is that there has been experience of trauma that hasn't been recognized, that hasn't therefore had space to be processed emotionally and energetically and physically. And then the body is desperately trying to protect the woman from having another traumatic experience. And it hasn't yet processed that traumatic experience. So it holds that trauma. And so we can see that in multiple different ways, and it has different expressions, but it could be pelvic floor tightness, hypersensitivity, and pain. And I do see the opposite, where we become very disembodied and we bury stuff so far deeply down into our body where we have really reduced sensation, poor activation of the muscles, and almost a sensation of I can't even feel that part of my body. Common language that women use is say that I literally have left that part of my body. It doesn't exist within me anymore. And so, yes, this is what I see, and this is why there's so many missing pieces of the puzzle for women when we don't recognize trauma. We feel like we have to just move on from it. And then we don't recognize that there's more to the body than just the physical body. So with all of that compiled in, plus a normalization of pain for women, a very medical view of how we see our body, it's like this, cascading cycle where we feel like we've lost all control, and we just can't, it's almost like women just give up. that this is also a common thing that we see, right, is that it's almost laughed off then as a coping mechanism that, once you have children, you really, you don't have time for sex anymore. You don't, you can write sex off as an enjoyable experience because, and for all of the other reasons that we might give, we're too tired, we keep getting interrupted by our children, which are all part of our reality, yes, but because we haven't been shown, but there is all of this here as well as that, then we don't have the tools. We haven't got the tools then to actually begin to address that, let alone opening a conversation with our partner or our husband about that, because sex is a taboo topic. And women feel so uncomfortable often in their bodies postpartum. They're like, I'm actually just trying to hide my body from my husband, let alone talking to him and saying, I'm actually feeling really vulnerable in my body right now. And what I need to feel and what women want to feel in their experience of sex is to feel safe, is to feel connected with the person who they're having this experience with. They're wanting it to be more than just a physical act. They're wanting it to be an emotional experience and an energetic experience and a spiritual experience as well, whether we have the language to say that or not. That is what we're yearning for. And when we're really trying to shut down our body and hide it and, feel like, oh, well, we have to please our husband, so we better just get on with it and do this, it doesn't become any of those things for us. And then so when we move through that and sort of push ourselves to be somewhere where we're not and have that experience, that in itself is like a further trauma to the body of, well, this is not what I wanted to feel. And now I push myself to have this experience. And it's just like, you can see where this continues on if we don't actually have an expectation that it could be different. And that's often the piece too, is that we don't think that it could be different because we're not having these conversations that you've so beautifully brought to the table.
And it's so sad, right? Because it's a combination of so many factors. You're not allowed to have the trauma. So since you're not allowed to have the trauma because it was just something someone said, or you do have that healthy baby, then you're actually not allowed to feel so bad about your body because, come on, you had a baby. And then it's this whole, there being no room, right, to even have that conversation because you're not even allowed to be there. So how do you get, you can't even accept that you're in that space, and then to talk about being in that space when you've been convinced by yourself and everyone around you that you're not you're not supposed to be there, then you get all you I think you just literally get tangled up. And I think I see this often with clients. They're just in a knot, and on so many levels, right? You're just so bottled up. And I wonder about that because then I can imagine if someone is watching and they're listening to you and they think, I recognize myself, but can it be really that easy? How can it be that I have the answers, that just sitting with myself and feeling my body could be the answer? What do you say to them?
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? Is when something can be so simple, it doesn't mean that it's not challenging. And it doesn't mean that you won't have the emotional experiences. And it doesn't mean that there's not work to be done. But it's not that you're broken, is the underlying piece, is that there is emotions to move through. There is stuff, for want of a better word. There is healing to be had, but it doesn't, we make it so complex because we want it to be complex if we want to have to sell you something.
Yes.
If I want to make this, to make money from this, for example, create a business from this, I need you to believe that it's going to take my skills to fix you. This is the marketing message, right? And it doesn't take my skills, it takes your skills, your capacity. And that is what we've stripped away from human beings and women, is that there is an innate knowing within you of your own pathway. I don't know it, only you know it. And that's the ultimate permission piece, is that you do support people, other women. You know, we want other people to be on our journey with us. We've had other women experience this before us who've moved through these emotions and experiences, so they have wisdom to share with us. And so we would never discount the need for support, safe spaces, and women to share their body wisdom with one another. But ultimately, you are the only person who's going to know your unique body, your body's unique language and the way it speaks to you, and your unique healing pathway. And there is certainly commonalities. And the more I work with women, the more I see particular, the common language that we use, the common patterns that we've experienced. But without a doubt, every woman's experience is still unique to her, and what helps her move through that experience will be unique for her, and what helps her move through it on each day is even unique for her. So my way of healing and connecting with my body one day might be closing my eyes and having a few connected breaths with my body. The next day it might be a self massage. The next day it might be playing with my children. And then the next day might be dancing around the house while I also, clean and get rid of all the clutter. It's going to be different for you in your body. And it's different because women are very cyclical beings. Like, we have an innate cycle within us through the menstrual cycle. It's very obvious. And so no one would be able to tell you this is your pathway, because you will know it. And yeah, I mean, we have sold to women that it's more complex than it is, because it's convenient to be complex because we need to sell you something.
And I think it's about your power as well. It's about what happens through birth.
Mhm.
Trauma has a lot to do with your power being taken away, because it's one of the most powerful moments you can experience. Even if there's a medical type of intervention, you can feel so powerful birthing that baby. And when someone takes your power away, and then to find that power back lying dormant inside you, that's, I think, always what you need to look for in a therapist or in support, for help to find that power back, and no one to be like, yeah, but I'm going to show you the way, because then you just keep spending your time in that same area of, I'm giving you my innate wisdom, I'm giving you my ideas and my energy, and you let me know what I do and I'll follow you. And it's so powerless, right? And in that aspect, I think a lot about sex is about power as well at the end of the day, right? The power to enjoy, the power to have an energetic experience, the power to be a partner who can vocalize what she wants and what brings her pleasure, and that she doesn't want to or that she wants to, and taking initiative and getting back to that place of, but what is my drive and what do I want my sex life to look like? So I think in that sense, I think that's what the whole conversation is about as well, losing your power and then finding it back, and then being able to stand in that female strength, and then as an expression of that, to then enjoy that female expression and sensuality and get into the wholeness of that experience as well. Um, so I think in that sense, a lot has been taken away from us as well of what you said. Like, we get pushed into that space like, oh, but it's, I'm a mom now, sex is off the table, and it's just something I have to do to keep him happy, when in essence, a healthy sex life is a is the biggest vitality booster you can give yourself at the end of the day. Is that something you see as well when you reclaim your power back as a woman? You see that in your clients, that it just starts flowing, your health, and problems just start to evaporate in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I often work with women and mothers who are, the idea of a birth of a mother. And when a mother is born, often uh, she starts to question everything in her life, her her everything. Where does she spend her time? Who is she friends with? Her work. And it seems like, well, why are we talking about work and friends, but we're talking about sex as well, and intimacy, and this autonomy, and personal power, and this reclamation of personal power. And the reason why, one, they're not separate from one another, they are all so interconnected. And when we hand over our personal power, when we go back to even what stories do you have about yourself and your body, and what do you believe to be true? Are they actually even yours? Were they taught? Did you take them upon yourself because it was a learned experience? And what does feel more true for you? And those very simple questions, and actually feeling into the answer of that, is that reclamation of personal power. And then things that seem so, the woman who wants to start her own business as a mother because she's got this, burning desire within to do a particular thing, to change the world in this way, or to express what's creatively within her. But she has, but I can't because of all the beliefs and all the, the conditioning that we would have hold us back. But as we start to claim this personal power, all of that just starts to fall away. And that's what you're saying is, you know, uh, healthy sex life becomes then also this way of building your own vision of what work and motherhood look like for you, and how I mother my children. I feel really, autonomous and powerful in my decisions, and feel really grounded in my decisions, and okay with my decisions, because I know they're coming from a place within me, which is my ultimate inner truth. And so when you start to live from that place in all aspects and all avenues of your life, then that is the reclamation of the woman. That is the full expression of this woman. That is her finding her personal power. And that is her really living out her soul's purpose. Her why she was born to be in this world was to be her unique her. We didn't come into this life to all be the same as one another. We came to be who we are. And so as we start to reel in that power through these simple practices of getting to know your body, be in your body, know what feels good for you, what doesn't feel good for you, to begin to express that, to articulate that, to verbalize that, whether it be in the way you move your body physically in terms of, for exercise and movement, whether it be how you approach your work and business, whether it be how you are in your relationship and your intimate relationship with your partner, your husband, whoever that might be. It's all comes back to you living from a place of your center. And for me, what I experience with women, bring it back to the pelvic health, is that this is the space in the body where it all sits. The creativity sits, the expression of self sits, the truth. When I sit with my body and I feel into where, and this is a common experience that I observe with women as well, when I say, where does that feel like it is in your body? It's often in the pelvis, in the pelvic bowl, where we literally create life, and where all forms of creativity stem from, whether that's, creating a relationship with your partner in the bedroom, to a business, to how you mother your children, to a artistic expression of yourself.
I love that. And it's so true. And I think, um, yeah, it's just so true. And I know we were talking about about courses and how people are trying to sell you something, but I really believe, if for you this is, if someone is watching and it's foreign and you don't know where to start, and you're experiencing this pain or this dissociation, I know you've just finished up your online course where you really help women go through the whole plethora of issues that you can experience in your pelvic area, in your body. And can you talk a bit about that, how that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I love. So, Homegrown is my new program, and I would call it an immersive experience. And it's a personal paced experience, and it is designed for women during pregnancy and postpartum. But I wouldn't give a length on how far postpartum, but I do speak to specifically to the changes in our deep core and pelvic floor and in our body through pregnancy and postpartum. But the important piece is that I also, so there's very, the science and the anatomy is certainly there, and the how do I approach movement now, and how is that safe for my pelvic floor. Uh, but within that, there are the practices, the beautiful and simple practices that are the complementary or the adjunct to all of that, which are the pieces that I was not taught as a woman or as a physiotherapist. And so it's the integration of those two pieces, but ultimately, always is coming back to this is a self discovery, a self revealing, a way of connecting to your body within so that you can reveal more and more of your own healing pathways. So, yes, I provide I would say how I work is that I have pieces of knowledge because I've studied pelvic health and physiotherapy and that sort of thing. So I have the anatomy and the physiology and the changes and the science evidence-based medicine to help with that. So I can fill in those gaps. I also have an embodied experience of moving through my own body and the changes in my own body and the tools that I have picked up along the way of breath practices, meditation practices, movement practices, self-massage practices, and really coming from that self-inquisitive, curious space where then I found my own healing pathway. But not once would I say, this is what you need to do. This is, because it's not a prescription, it's not a step by step. It's here is all of the options. Here is a way to explore your body. And from those practices, what comes up with you for you and what shows itself to you, and the answers will be unique to you and they will be there, will be completely different. So for me, it was really changing the way I moved with my body, how I connected with my body, the pace at which I was trying to move through my experience needed to really slow down, and I needed to practice stillness. For another woman, it might be she needs to express herself through dance and through movement or through art, or I'm just saying that is a common experience that women say, I've lost my connection with movement and dance, and so that might be her pathway. But what comes up through each particular practice is going to be unique for her. But ultimately, this is the tools to explore your body, to connect with your body, and then what you do with that and how you move through that that's the uniqueness of it. And that's what I love about it, is that, and it's how I work as a practitioner, this can work in any way that you want it to look like and be like and feel like for you. This is not a step-by-step process. It's you access this, you try this on. If it doesn't resonate, you don't use it, you go to something else. And there's no right or wrong way to move through this. It's your way is your way.
Mhm. I love that. And I love what you said at the start as well, that we have this notion that we can only have complaints postpartum when it's 6 weeks or 3 months, or a really short period actually, where there's like a period of empathy and grace. But when your kids are running around, it's like it can't be postpartum. It's impossible. It can't be that your sex life isn't healthy because it's postpartum related. And I think that's so important to underwrite it as well, that your experience is your experience, and it's totally normal, even after 3 years, to still have those complaints coming from pregnancy and giving birth and not recovering in a healthy manner. And
Totally. And I'm sure you see that within your work all of the time as well, where, you know, that postnatal depletion and uh, that disc. I mean, I'm sure we see so many common things within our work with women in this space, and that is definitely one. Is that, you know, we are taught, you know, 6 weeks is particularly a time frame, particularly in Australian healthcare system, where you go and have your postnatal assessment. And so then we think, oh, after 6 weeks must be something dramatic changes. And yes, there's a lot of change in the body there, but it doesn't mean that you're recovered after 6 weeks. And then I think there's this new terminology, and there's some beautiful things about the concept of the fourth trimester. So that being that early postpartum recovery period. But even in that language, you know, after 3 months after baby, then I must be. And then I said, no, no, well, it's often 2 years. But like you just said, I didn't start to feel quite normal in my body. When I say normal, that's such a delicate word that I really err on the side of caution of using. But I didn't feel like I was no longer in this acute recovery phase until 3 years after I had my second child. And so I've never described it like that, actually, and I feel like that's a beautiful way of now me going, that's what I mean. I did no longer feel like I was in an acute recovery phase. I felt like I was more just no longer in that, okay, we're having still such big ongoing shifts and changes. And that was 3 years. 3 years.
and we don't give ourselves that period of grace. It's not taught to us. We're not being told that. And especially if you're breastfeeding for a long time, then it's almost impossible, right? To say, okay, it's been 3 months, I've been through my fourth trimester, here I am. It's gonna take you a while. And it's okay, and it's fine that it takes you a while. And it's okay that you're gonna struggle a bit. That's part of the journey as well. But you can struggle in a non-accepting way, or you can struggle and be like, this is part of my journey. And it's gonna take.
Totally. And that's the thing. You're not broken as you are in that sensation of feeling you're still recovering, because you can still feel very whole in that journey. And it's in the acceptance of I'm in that journey where the wholeness sensation comes from, is that this is life. Like, this is the transitions that my body moves through, and a celebration of that, and going, well, now I get to experience what this feels like in my body. What would that be like, and how can I make this look and feel good for me? Rather than trying to be like, well, could I just skip that step? Because that's not what life is. That's not the opportunity that we're given when we're birthed into this existence, is not to skip over parts of it, because that's what we're here for. We're here to feel it and to experience it.
And I think that's why I love the non-linearity of your program of the homegrown, because that's the exact experience you're going to have. It is non-linear, and not everything is going to work the same as it worked for someone else. And you taking this step and it working for you doesn't mean it works for me. So that discovery, and that it's okay to discover, just like it's okay that you first need to even meet that child and get to know that child before there's like this natural motherhood instinct that we're all led to believe is present. You need to get to know each other. What do you like? What do you want? And that's life. There's no one straight line up. It's gonna take you some way which gonna it's gonna feel like it's not the highway, but it's fine, right? That's gonna enrich the whole experience. And I love that you emphasize that, because I think it's so important, especially as a mom and having other little people take priority over you and not being the owner of your time anymore, that it's okay. It's not going to be 100% perfect, and it doesn't have to be. Just like your sex life, it's okay that it's not like it used to be, but it can be better than it was before and different.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that. And it is like if we need to be willing to be vulnerable with ourselves to be able to then explore that, to explore sex in a really intimate, sensual, amazing sex life takes such vulnerability, not in the sense of feeling unsafe, but feeling really courageous to connect with yourself in a way that feels, you know, unsure, like an exploratory pathway. And like you said, that's your pathway with how you get to know your children. That's your pathway as a mother. And this non-linear pathway is the pathway of a woman's body. That's how we are in our body. We're not linear beings. We have this underlying cyclical nature. And so trying to imagine that it is a linear pathway just absolutely makes no sense for women and women's bodies, because we're not made like that. Life is not made like that. It's not a reflection of our reality. So then when we're trying to force ourselves to create a pathway that is linear, it feels so wrong to us. And I feel like that's where the disconnect comes from, is that it feels so wrong, but we're told from somebody else outside of us, no, but that is the way, that's the pathway, it must be right, you're just doing this wrong. And so we continually go back to that of, oh, it must be me, I'm doing something wrong. You're not. And that's why trusting in your own self and bringing it back to what feels good and right for you, trust that, follow that, because that is your pathway. It's non-linear, and it's going to be, you discover one piece and it shows you another piece and it's revealing. And that is how life works as well. So I really love how you've put that all together of motherhood and life and getting to know your child and then sex in the bedroom. And this is also the interconnectedness of it all. When we start to explore life in this way and our bodies in this way, we start to see that even though things would be seemingly unrelated, and this is where we came back to from our last conversation, was really what we revealed is that it's not even about the sex. When there is pain with sex, or when it's not about, it's about the relationship to self and the acceptance of self and the expression of truth and all of those things. And yes, sex is a part of it, but it's not. Yeah, I love how you said it was. What really came out of our last conversation is that it's not about the sex. And I'd love to know if you've got more to add on that sort of piece that really landed for you in our last conversation, um, because I totally, totally agree.
Yeah, well, it was all you. It was your insight. Let's be very clear about that. I think for me, it was so insightful because we get so sucked into this linear thinking, but also the practicality of things as well. Like it's supposed to work like this, and I'm supposed to feel pleasure in the same way I always felt pleasure. And we get sucked into an experience that it's okay to let go of it. And it's okay as well to go back to the essence of what you were saying in our last conversation. I'm not feeling safe in my body. And as long as I don't feel safe in my body, I am not going to feel pleasure in my body. And if we are allowed to first deal with the safety and then deal with the self acceptance and then deal with, okay, but who am I now and what is pleasure for me and how will it look like? I think you're going to change so much of the dynamics that you see in this postpartum period, in the postnatal depletion, because you turn it around and you are allowed to have your own experience, and you're allowed to not be happy with your birth. You're allowed to not feel great. You're allowed to not want to linearly recover. It's okay. And yeah, I that was for me such an inspiring insight when we said goodbye last time. And again, I am so grateful that you took the time out, and we're talking for an hour almost now. So I think I'm gonna cut this in two pieces. But yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. You're such a wise and inspiring and just beautiful soul. And I'm just so thankful that you wanted to take the time out of your day to share so much of you and so much of your knowledge and also your experience, right, in this setting. So thank you for that, Taryn, and thank you for who you are.
Oh, you're so beautiful. And I think, you are a woman who is bringing, you've had a series of conversations with multiple women around this topic and around women's bodies. And so to equal celebration of you and your work. And the wisdom that I have is one through embodied practice and experience, but it's through conversations like this. I don't get this clarity and understanding from me being myself in my own body. It's through the conversations, it's through my work with women where I get to hear their wisdom and their body wisdom. And then I take that and think, wow, the more we have these conversations, the more we share this with other women, then the more women's wisdom, body wisdom that comes to light. And that this will ultimately be, I hope, how future generations then begin to relate to themselves in their body and to other women, is by having these more and more open conversations. So I'm really grateful for you to be bringing these conversations to life, and it's so helpful for me in the way I work with women, because every conversation something else lands for me. I get more clarity, and then, like, we as a collective of women become more clear together as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much.